Okay friends, it's Jason, back again with the Subaru Impreza. I thought I might do a little tour of my engine bay. It's 2016 Subaru Impreza Sport CVT 2 liter. Alright, 2 liter, why? Yes, that's the only engine that it came with in North America here. I'm in California, and I picked this up in the end of 2015, December. And I bought it because it had a nice spoiler, had the STI spoiler. And then, it drove fine and it got some, pretty good numbers on paper. So I was like, my first car, I'm going to spend the money on it, and this is what it is. Fast forward 7 years now, I've done a lot of research on this chassis, the GP chassis, and have, you know, done some documentation, and I have a small website. Comes with the FB20. The FB20B. This is the version that came not on the 2012 and 2013 models, but the ones that came on the 2015 plus models. So after the update, and they changed a couple of things on the FB20B engine, non-direct injection. This is a port injected engine, and they changed the pulleys. I think they got rid of the steering pump, and then they changed to an electronic steering rack on this one. There's less pulleys. Also, I've heard through the tuner that I use that they changed out the ECU. The ECU in the 2012 models were like an older CAN bus version, and then starting on 2015, they started using a different ECU. So it's the same one that the BRZ, similar to the BRZ's programming. So that came around in 2015. So there are some like slight differences. I know a lot of you guys that come to this channel are like 2017 plus, and that's when they changed over to the different chassis, and they started using an FB20D, the direct injection model. But for the most part, like I haven't done anything to the engine and only a slight tune, but all the bolt-ons that I've done in this engine, there's quite a few, right? So okay, the first one that I did, I think it was the charcoal filter delete. What was the second thing I did? I think it was a filter, a high flow filter, having a Pexi JDM filter in there. You guys can use like K&N's or like any other brand that basically is just like a nicer grade filter. I particularly like the Pexi one because it has a rubber O-ring around it to make a nice seal, right? And you can wash it too, so it's great. Okay, what's the next thing that I did in the engine bay? Probably something like the pitch stop in there. You see that purple thing? Keeps the engine from bucking back and forth. Smoother shifting for manual users and CVT users too. I think I also bought this STI strut bar. There's a bunch of different strut bars that you guys can get. Good for cornering and things like that. Okay, what else did I do? I think at that point I started trying to do canyons. I started canyon driving, and I found that my brakes, they faded pretty quickly, and I found out that you can do a really easy modification, which is well, it's not easy, but flush your brake fluid. Instead of using the standard .3 fluid, you can use a .4, and that increases the dry and wet boiling, right? So it increases the boiling point of the brake fluid, and that gives a little bit more assurance that your brakes aren't gonna kind of boil up and get mushy, right? It's like the scariest thing is literally when your brakes do not work. So that was a really, I did that. I put .4 fluid. Okay, I think at that point I was like, what else can I do, right? And I think I found there was a steering damper lockdown. I think it was originally designed by Perrin, but it got copied and used by other companies. But I have a torque solution version of it. Then back to that braking thing, I got a master cylinder brace in there. That works too. Solidifies the braking pedal under like heavy pedal press. through the firewall. At that point, I think I started looking into like more of the air intake. Experimented with the Takeda intake, just having a hybrid intake at that point, and that was good. But it opened the kind of reliability doors, and I started looking into air oil separators and a catch can. Little segue about my catch can, guys. I used to have a catch can that ran down here, if you remember, and it went all the way back up there. And it worked for many, many years. The catch can that I had was a Mishimoto clone, and it had a very restrictive brass filter inside of it. I removed that, and even then, after that, I still had issues. This is many, many years of running this thing, and so I finally modified it to something that I'm actually, happy about, because the idea of the crankcase ventilation breather is that the line that goes from the engine block back into the intake pipe, I found that the routing for that needs to be as short as possible and as free as possible. And I used to run it all the way down here and then all the way back again. So there was maybe triple, maybe even quadruple the length that it used to be. And then plus the restriction of being inside of that can and things like that, right? So I've had a lot of heavy oiling issue. I'll admit it. I've had a lot of oiling issues with this car. Things like timing covers, seeping oil, and then also the cam carriers seeping a little bit of oil here and there. I run the car pretty hard, guys. To be honest, I'm in the high 4,000 to 6,000 RPMs quite a bit because I enjoy it. This car just is a lot of fun when you drive it in those RPMs. Anyway, so there's a lot of oil pressure, but I found that the oiling issues do come from the PCV and the crankcase ventilation. And so here I've shortened the path. It goes literally directly up. I still have my catch can, but it's behind that fabricated bracket that I have there. It's not the prettiest, guys, but I do what works. And that super short hose right there, see that? So that's about the same length as the OEM one, and it has my custom baffle thing in there just to keep that intake pipe and that MAF sensor kind of clean. You don't want that oil spewing back into that area and getting sucked into the intake manifold and then to be burned. It is fully functional and it's much more efficient than my previous solution. So, evolution. So, I had the air oil separator, the Baja version there of Crawford, and then I started, I was like, Crawford, oh, they make all this stuff for Subarus. And I'm like, okay, intake manifold extensions, right? That's basically just making your intake manifold longer. The path that comes to here, this is a longer intake runner. And a little bit about that, they do work. They change the harmonics of the engine. They change where the power band happens, about 1,000 RPMs lower. Very good for cruising, very good for, just, it actually helps off the line if you're willing to get up into the 4,000 range, right? So I enjoy them, and they were a little bit of me getting hands-on in the engine bay. That's the only real fun bolt-on that was in this car, right? I got to take off the intake manifold and smell the gasoline. It was nice. So the other things that I added to this engine bay, I think then I started thinking about cooling, right? And cooling was very important because the CVT down there and the engine with the whatever kind of exhaust manifold or header you have, it produces a lot of heat, right? And the way to mitigate heat is with coolers or shielding or insulation of some sort or evacuation of heat. And I think I tried all of those methods and I employ them subtly in this engine bay here and there. So here, this is the weather strip, right? And I just removed the weather strip a little bit to allow some passive air to evacuate out of the edge of the hood there. You don't want to remove it completely because, there's air that can kind of come back in, things like that. You might subtly ruin your aero, but it's still there halfway in effect just to remove excess heat from the hood if I do stand at a light for a long time. Down there I have a It's a CVT transmission. The secondary catalytic converter radiates heat directly onto the CVT casing. And so I have a small heat shield down there wrapped around the secondary catalytic converter. A lightweight pulley for the water pump, and I replaced one of the idlers with a slightly lighter weight aftermarket idler there. It has, replaceable bearings. What other things have I done in this? Coilovers, Fortunato 500s. I did that kind of like midway through. Very good upgrade, guys. The top hats, right? They changed how the car runs. I had to get my battery replaced, right? Because the stock Subaru battery was not the best thing. I think it died exactly at 3 years. And it was after a cold couple of nights, and I didn't start the car. And then like the third or fourth day, I was like, I need to go. And it didn't start. So then I had to get a new battery. I suggest, guys, an AGM absorbed gas mat battery. There's all different brands. Just look for one of those. A little bit more expensive, but they last a little bit longer, and they're more reliable. I think it's like a better battery technology at approximately the cost. Oil filters here and there, right? I think now Subaru's starting to use those better filters, because after everyone's been complaining on the internet, I use a JDM stubby filter here. Tokyo Roki makes that one. And then some of the heat stuff down there. I have headers. I think that was like the cherry on top of the build. Applying the tune, the off-the-shelf tune that I have from Throttle Happy Rev 6A. With those headers, it's everything came together. The headers down there have just like a slight heat shield kind of wrapping down there. It's very minimal. It's kind of a messy job, but it works to retain some of the heat in those exhaust headers, right? Like the engine bay gets really hot if you just leave open headers. The OEM ones, they're cast, and they also have heat shields around them, right? That's to retain all of the heat inside the header. You can actually get a little bit more torque and more exhaust scavenging, which is better efficiency for the engine. So I really hope to get back down there someday to wrap those up properly. Less heat soak in the engine bay, and also a little bit more torque because of the thermal efficiency, right? So that's my engine bay, guys. Oh, there's a CVT cooler down there. At some point I added that before the headers. And then on top of the CVT cooler, I also have a CVT cooler sprayer that I just kind of made myself, right? A lot of this modifications on this little economy Subaru Impreza is really just heat management, right? And then tightening up a lot of the suspension and drivetrain, right? It's a lot of fun, guys. And you can do a lot of modifications on your car and make it just, +1 better every single time. Okay, so that's it, guys. My Subaru.